Early years. Cobain and Krist Novoselic met in 1985. Both were fans of the Melvins, and both were interested in forming a band. They worked with a series of drummers, Aaron Burkhardt, Dan Peters and Dale Crover of the Melvins, who played on their first demos, before settling on Chad Channing. Channing played on their first album, Bleach, released by Sub Pop Records. Bleach was highly influenced by Cobain's then-favorite band, the Melvins, as well as the heavy dirge rock of Mudhoney. Though he did not actually play on the album, Jason Everman was credited as playing guitar on Bleach, because he put up the money for the recording sessions. After the album's completion, Everman had a brief and contentious tenure with the band as a second guitar player, but was ousted following their first US tour. Not long after, he briefly played bass with Soundgarden, and later formed the band Mind Funk. In early 1990, the band began working with producer Butch Vig on recordings for the follow-up to Bleach. During the sessions, Kurt and Krist realized that Chad wasn't quite the drummer the band needed, and he was let go after the sessions were complete. After a few weeks with Dale Crover of the Melvins filling in, they drafted Mudhoney drummer Dan Peters, with whom they recorded the song Sliver. In 1990, Dave Osborne of the Melvins later hooked them up with Dave Grohl, who drummed with DC hardcore punk Scream. Nirvana continued touring afterwards, including a stint with Sonic Youth chronicled in the documentary 1991, The Year Punk Broke. Nevermind. Following repeated recommendation by Sonic Youth's Kim Gordon, David Geffen signed Nirvana in 1990, and the band began recording their first major label album. The result, Nevermind, is now regarded as a classic. The album was produced by Butch Vig, who had previously worked with Sonic Youth and Smashing Pumpkins. After recording, Vig initially started off to mix the album as well, but both Vig and Nirvana were not satisfied with their results, so they decided to call in someone else to mix the album. DGC sent them a list with possible options. Cobain did not want to use mixers that had worked with other bands he liked because he did not want to sound like them, so he decided to call in the guy at the bottom of the list after whose name it read Slayer, Andy Wallace. Later Cobain would complain in the press that Wallace had made Nevermind sound too slick, although Wallace had been his own choice, and the band members themselves had been involved in the mixing process. Wallace, however, had tempered the band's indie rock leanings, and had created a mainstream-ready rock sound that others would attempt to duplicate for the next decade. Nevermind was a massive, unexpected success, selling millions of copies. The highly infectious single Smells Like Teen Spirit received heavy airplay on MTV, inspiring a slew of imitators, bringing the grunge sound, as well as so-called alternative rock and alternative culture, into the mainstream. The popularity of alternative rock as well as the sidelining of hair metal is often credited to Nevermind. Citing exhaustion, the band decided not to undertake another US tour in support of Nevermind, instead opting to make a handful of performances later that year. In February of 1992, following an Australian tour, Cobain married Courtney Love in Hawaii. Courtney gave birth to a daughter, Frances Bean, in August. Just days after Frances Bean's birth, Nirvana put on a memorable performance at the MTV Video Music Awards. MTV had wanted the band to play Teen Spirit, but the band wanted to play a new song called Rape Me. MTV was appalled at the idea of a song called Rape Me, and eventually agreed that the band could play Lithium instead. When the band began their performance, Kurt strummed the first few bars of Rape Me, giving the MTV execs a solid shock before jumping into Lithium. Just weeks later, Nirvana performed one of its most popular concerts, headlining at the Reading Festival. Cobain entered the stage in a wheelchair as a practical joke, then proceeded to get up and join the rest of the band in tearing through an assortment of old and new material. Nirvana released Incesticide, a collection of B-sides and rarities, in December of 1992. It is believed that they did so to circumvent bootleggers. The album contains such fan favorites as Sliver and Aneurysm, as well as covers of songs by the Vaselines, a band that became more popular as a result of Nirvana's covers. In Utero. For 1993's In Utero, the band brought in producer Steve Albini, perhaps best known for his work on the highly influential Pixies album Surfer Rosa. The sessions with Albini were productive and notably quick. The initial version of the album was recorded and mixed in 2 weeks, a far cry from the months spent recording and mixing Nevermind. Some saw bringing in Albini as a deliberate move on Nirvana's part to give the album a rawer, more unpolished sound, that the band wanted to alienate or distance some of their new mainstream audience who'd paid little or no attention to the alternative, obscure, or experimental bands Nirvana saw as their forebears. One song on In Utero featuring long periods of shrill feedback noise was titled, ironically, Radio-Friendly Unit Shifter. In the IndusTL, a radio-friendly unit shifter describes an ideal album, one capable of heavy radio play and ultimately selling many copies, or units. However, Cobain insisted that Albini's sound was simply the one he'd always wanted Nirvana to have, a natural recording without layers and layers of studio trickery. While popular perception after the fact was that the band wanted this distorted Mastiar Pais, they were actually unhappy with certain aspects of Albini's mixes. Specifically, they thought the bass levels were too low, and Cobain felt that Heart-Shaped Box and All Apologies didn't sound perfect. Longtime REM producer Scott Litt was called in to help remix those two songs, with Cobain adding additional instrumentation and backing vocals. Litt also remixed Pennyroyal Tea, but Albini's version was used on the album. Within Utero, the band also faced corporate censorship. Giant store chain Walmart refused to carry the album, citing song titles like Rape Me and Kurt's plastic fetus collage on the album's artwork as too controversial for the family-oriented chain. The band decided to abide by the request, and compiled a version of the album with clean artwork and Rape Me retitled Waif Me. Other than the inclusion of Litt's mix of Pennyroyal Tea, however, the music on the album was identical to the wider release. When asked about the edited version, Kurt noted that he could relate to the small-town residents that had no other local music stores and were forced to buy their music at Walmart. While Heart-Shaped Box was received warmly by alternative radio, and In Utero debuted at #1 on the Billboard album chart, the album didn't enjoy the same success as Nevermind. When the band embarked on the US In Utero tour, with Pat Smear of the punk rock band The Germs as second guitarist, its first major tour of the States, since the success of Smells Like Teen Spirit, it regularly played to half-filled arenas, stymied by the lack of tour support for Nevermind and the challenging new release. In November of 1993, the band decided to change direction, and sat down for an appearance on MTV Unplugged. The sessions revealed the depth of Cobain's songwriting, which had often been buried under the sonic fury of the band's sound. The song selection also demonstrated Cobain's broad musical interests through his choice of cover songs. It became a hallmark moment of Nirvana's history, if not amplified by the tragedy soon to follow. In early 1994, the band embarked on a European tour. While the tour started off well, the performances gradually declined, with Kurt looking bored and distracted during the shows. Following a tour stop at Terminal 1 in Munich, Germany, on March 1, Cobain was diagnosed with bronchitis and severe laryngitis. The next night's show at the same venue was cancelled. On the morning of March 4, Cobain was found unconscious by Courtney Love and rushed to the hospital. The doctor told a press conference that the singer had reacted to a combination of prescription Rohypnol and alcohol. The rest of the tour was cancelled, including a planned leg in the UK. In the ensuing weeks, Cobain's heroin addiction resurfaced. An intervention was organized, and Cobain was convinced to check into rehab. After less than a week in rehab, Cobain climbed over the wall of the facility and flew back to Seattle. A week later, on Friday, April 8, 1994, Cobain's body was discovered at his Seattle home, dead of an apparent suicide, effectively dissolving Nirvana.